All right, here we go. OverDrive off and running. TSN 1050 on the TSN app, your home smart speaker, and up on TSN 4. Bryan Hayes, Gord Miller. How are we doing this afternoon, Gord?
I am very well.
You're doing very well.
I'm doing very well. Yep.
Why is that?
Well,
just in general, that's how you live your life?
I'm an upbeat, glass half full guy, but my daughter got back from L.A. safely, survived the concert last night. So that was wheels on the ground.
That's always a good thing. No airport pickup.
No airport.
Was there an airport pickup? No airport pickup?
I did not pick her up at the airport. She was picked up at the airport, but not by me.
Yeah, the airport pickup can be sticky. Everyone's got a different viewpoint of the importance of an airport drop-off and pickup.
So I know people that insist on being picked up, and that seems to be an inefficient use of my time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't do a lot of drop-offs and pickups. Not a lot. I'm okay with it. You know, if you really need me to be there, but if I have to completely adjust my schedule, that just doesn't seem fair.
Dropping off is fine because you know what you're in for, right? I'm just going to drop you off, tuck and roll, out you go.
See you later.
Have a good day. But now
the pickup could be complicated.
So, and the other thing is the traffic, right? I mean, like, I don't know if you know this, but I fly a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to always book my flights so that I would take off and land at quiet times. So say flying back from New York, I would not take the first flight in the morning. I would land at like 10:30, so you avoid. There's no avoiding the traffic.
There really isn't in Toronto anymore.
There's literally no time of day now that you can land at Pearson or go to Pearson that is not. So I mean, we love Mike Johnson, right?
Yeah,
one of my favorites. So Mike and I were going to the World Championship in May, and Mike likes to go to the airport early. Not so much, but so flight was at 5:40. I book a car to pick me up at 3. That's reasonable.
Yeah.
Fire alarm goes off in my condo. Elevators don't work. I've got a giant suitcase, a smaller carry-on in my briefcase. Like I'm not going down the stairs. I got to wait. So it finally unfreezes at 3:45. So now I'm in the teeth of traffic, and I'm going to Pearson. So MJ's
and you're flying international, I would assume.
MJ's texting me like, "Where are you, man?" I'm like, "I'm at Yorkdale."
Yeah.
So this is like 4:40. I'm at Yorkdale. Stop dead. So I get to the airport at 5 for a 5:40 flight. They tell me, no way, your bag won't make it. You make a run for it and see if you can get on the plane. So I go through security. They pull both of my bags aside for secondary screening. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Run. It's a gate E75, way at the end of I'm running. They're calling my name. And I make it. Get on the plane. MJ's laughing. So we fly to Frankfurt and on to Riga, Latvia. And when we land in Latvia, my bag shows up. MJ's didn't.
Yeah, I knew it was coming. Like I was waiting for it. Yeah. I'm like, I know where this is going. Yeah. MJ was there first, and somehow he's going to be inconvenienced, and your bag is going to show up. Because there really is no rhyme or reason for why a bag disappears.
But I'm sitting there repacking in the car.
Right.
At 4:40, thinking I need to take a suit out. I need to have a suit in my carry-on in case my stuff doesn't get there in time.
It's so nerve-wracking when you're cutting it close, but when you make it, it's an incredible feeling. And then what you've done is you've cut off the wasting of any time because your heart has been racing the whole. It almost became a part of the adventure.
So I live in Midtown. So if I'm flying domestically, if I got a 10 a.m. flight, I leave my place at like 8:45. And that'll get me there.
Not going through customs or anything. You got to go through.
Not checking.
But you're flying. You got Nexus, I'm sure. All that. You're right through.
But it is a gamble now with the traffic.
Yes, of course. It's been that way for quite some time. And Pearson can be a bit of a more than just a bit of a gong show.
So I was driving downtown.
You never know what you're getting out of Pearson anymore.
I was driving downtown today. Like, if no one's working downtown, who are all these people?
Well, maybe tourism's coming back. Who knows? Because the Jays are not in town. They're still playing. Right? They're down in Cleveland. And every time they get the bases loaded, that is a sign that the inning is about to come to an end.
You were like, so we're sitting there watching the game, and they had the bases loaded, I think, in the 8th.
In the 6th and in the 7th. I think they had 2 on in the 7th.
Right. And you're like, well, this inning's over.
Honestly, I feel like
you basically said, like, this is it.
They should petition the league and just say, if the Blue Jays get bases loaded, no outs, cut to commercial, cut the inning off, and stop wasting people's time. That's what I would suggest they do.
I think you can't do that.
I'm sure they can't, but I would like to see it happen. I would prefer they don't ever have the bases loaded, because if they do, it's a formality. Strikeout, pop out, see you later. They cannot cash runs. It is absurd watching this team. They win last night. Now, this series in Cleveland, today notwithstanding, because you've actually got some action. Springer got tossed. Schneider was snapping. There's things to get into today. The first 3 games of this series was the most watching paint dry type series of the season, and it's not even close. Infuriating to watch this team try to manufacture any runs. I will say, defensively, they've been great. The pitching's been spectacular. They're still winning ball games. They're still in a race, which I think it's a compliment. There's a glass half full here with the Jays, where if the bats somehow get hot at the right time, all of a sudden you have the makings of a very good team, possibly elite team. But watching them just puke all over themselves with runners in scoring position, it's really a daunting task. It's very difficult to do.
So I watched the Jays closely. The grappler,
Yeah, you had orders last
passively aggressively 2 days ago suggested that I should watch the Jays closely because I was, co-hosting with you.
That's right.
So I did. I get 2-1-0 games. And in both cases, the one was scored in the first 30 minutes of the game.
Right. Springer hit a home run the second at-bat of the game last night.
Yeah, so I'm sitting there, and I remember watching an L.A. Kings game in the Darryl Sutter era, and L.A. scored like 2 minutes into the game at 10:45 at night. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to sit here until 1 in the morning, and this game's going to end 1-0.
Right. They might score an empty netter and win 2-0.
And I remember thinking, so Tuesday night, I guess it was. Tuesday night, I watched the 1-0 game. Mm-hmm. 2.5 hours of nothing. And then last night,
1-0 game.
1-0.
Yeah. No, it's been absurd.
But don't you think, I would say big picture, if I'd said to you in April, Alek Manoah, George Springer, and Vladdy Guerrero Jr. are going to have subpar years. Like Manoah's going to be a smoking crater.
Mm-hmm. Which he was, Springer, for the most part, again today.
Springer's really going to struggle. And Vladdy's going to have a below average season for him. Would you have thought they'd be in a playoff spot?
Probably not. Probably difficult to see that because those were the guys you penciled in believing they would be impact players, right? And right. You were questioning what would Kikuchi do? Could Barrios bounce back? What's Bassett as a new arm? Although I think there were confidence in that he'd be pretty good. What would the bullpen bring? Could the old guys coming off injuries like Kiermaier and Belt actually supply anything? Like those were the question marks.
So if I listed,
I would add Alejandro Kirk to that list too. Kirk was an all-star last year. He was he was the best hitting catcher in the American League last year, and he's had a sub-average year himself.
So if I listed these things to you: hitting, pitching, defense, bullpen. So starting pitching and bullpen. And at the start of the year, you would have thought hitting would have been their strength. Mm-hmm. You would have thought
probably the rotation because Manoah, Gausman, Bassett had high expectations 1 through 3.
You would have thought bullpen would have been weak and maybe
defense they improved because with Varsho and with Kiermaier, the expectation was it was going to get better, but still.
But the bullpen's been excellent.
Bullpen's been outstanding. The rotation's been very good.
So don't you think that's a strange?
It is very strange that this is how they've got here.
The whole thing doesn't make sense because.
But it doesn't have to, right? It doesn't matter how you manufacture these wins.
You should.
It's how many you got.
You should hit better with runners in scoring position. You should.
Yes, the pressure's on the pitcher in that scenario.
He's got to throw strikes.
Right. But this is, I know this is a smaller sample size in terms of what's happened specifically in Cleveland, but the amount of times they've had the bases loaded with one or fewer outs and have not been able to manufacture anything and at no point looked as if they were about to is staggering because this Cleveland team's got nothing. They cannot hit. They got Ramirez.
They're in the bottom of the league in almost every.
They cannot hit. You put 3 or 4 runs on the board every game. You should walk out of here with 3 or 4. They still have an opportunity to do that if they can find a way to win here. But listen, It's so frustrating. It is so frustrating because it's the same story every single day.
But it doesn't make any sense.
Well, it doesn't have to make any sense.
But it would be one thing if...
Yet they're, again, 14 games over 500.
Right.
Like they're a good baseball team in a playoff spot, and it's August 10th. But the devil is in the details in terms of why they're actually not even better. And it's simply clutch hitting. And it has been since day one of the regular season. Day one of the season, it's been a struggle for them. And I don't know why there's any reason to believe it's just going to be rectified at some point or something's going to break their way. Unless if it is luck, and you've been kind of hammering that the last 2 days, or them being unlucky. I guess from that standpoint, you could start rolling the dice and it could get hot for you. Like some things may just start to land. But you look at a lot of these ABs, like they're terrible at bats. Like they're down 0-1, 0-2 in the count, 1-2 in the count almost immediately, and they're chasing it.
Kirk's at bat with the bases loaded.
Exactly. Schneider, the same thing. He was 1-2, and he chased a fastball and struck out.
And Kirk snapped the dugout afterwards. I mean, at a certain point...
Frustrating for them, I'm sure.
At a certain point, it does become mental. Doesn't it?
I think that clearly has to play a role in it. It's a combination of approach, mental, confidence... it's not simply the game planning against them every single time. It's not that they're facing a supreme arm every time they're on, when they're dealing with runners in scoring position. That's another thing. There have been times over the course of the season, you've got a guy in the mound who you should be pouncing on. It's not like they're facing Garrett Cole every time they have the bases loaded. It's just simply not the case, and yet this is where they find themselves, and we'll continue to track what's going on down in Cleveland. It's over. They lost 4-3. So there you go. The Jays take 2 of 4 in Cleveland.
So hang on.
They actually put 3 runs on the board, and it wasn't enough today. And why was it not enough? Because of your boy, Alek Manoah.
The Blue Jays
Manoah gave up 4. He, what do you have? Give up 6 hits, I think. 3 walks today. 4 earned runs on 4 innings pitched.
Jays are batting .212 with the bases loaded. They have as of this morning, they have the third most at bats in baseball, all of baseball. Mm-hmm. With the bases loaded, hitting .212. The Yankees are hitting .351. The Mariners are .344. They're .212.
Well, would be worse after today.
Right.
It would be worse after today. And I saw a stat last night. The Jays are the only team in baseball that have at least 3 players with 15 or more grounded into double plays. Springer, Kirk, and Vladdy. Think about that. 15 for Vladdy, 16 for Kirk, 17 for Springer, grounding into double plays. Like, that's an absurd stat. How many times they get up with anybody on, and they cannot manufacture either a rally or runs. They can't just move the line along. And like those stats you just said, batting .212 with the bases loaded, it's worse after today because they had multiple opportunities and they couldn't do anything. So... it might be around 205 now, 207.
I'm looking at the box score from the game. It says they left 10 runners on base today.
Yeah.
So that they lead the majors by a wide margin in runners left on base.
Yeah. It's got to be so frustrating for Schneider, for like Martinez, for Mattingly, for Atkins, for Shapiro, for ownership. They must be looking at this and just thinking.
And what can you do?
I can't believe they continue to do the same thing every single series, and yet they're 65 and 52. Like, there is a glass half full here. There absolutely is an optimistic viewpoint that it is such an acute issue. It's not injuries, albeit Bichette's out, Kiermaier's out, and Bo plays a big role in this. Bo's hitting, I believe, over 300 with runners in scoring position. He's hitting over 300, period, basically in every situation. So Bo has been clutch for them. Bo is clutch. And without Bichette, that's clearly going to cause concerns. And even you take Kiermaier out, he's had a really good year. But the glass half full is the Jays are still in a good position. You know, you're in a good position. And Boston's fading, the Yankees are fading, the Angels have faded. It appears as if it's Seattle, Toronto, Houston, Tampa chasing down wildcard spots, and 3 of them are available. 4 teams for 3 spots. Like, that's a good place to be in August 10th.
Now, how many games does Seattle have left against Oakland?
Probably a fair amount. I'd have to look that up, but I would assume at least another series or 2. And yet they probably play Houston a couple more times as well.
Yeah.
And someone's got to lose there, right? So that could be beneficial for the Jays.
One thing baseball does better than anyone is the schedule. The way they do the September schedule.
It's all against your division.
It's divisional. And I think the NHL should take a page from that. We've talked about the schedule in hockey before.
Mm-hmm.
Calgary and Edmonton last year were finished on like December 28th.
Right.
They played 3 times. The Islanders and Rangers were done.
Yeah. I think the Leafs and Habs played multiple games early and then didn't see each other again for like 3 or 4 months.
The last 20 games of your schedule should be division and conference games.
I think that'd be great.
Just pound away.
Yeah.
Because that's the best. Baseball does that as well as anyone.
Yes.
Just
now, they control their stadiums, which goes a long way. Like the NHL, it's more complicated because you're competing, or not competing, but you're sharing it a lot of times with NBA teams or with Drake. You see Drake knock the Leafs out of their own building for a preseason game. The Leafs had to announce today that they've moved the Friday game to Thursday, I think, now because Drake's rolling through town, which means they're probably looking at it saying, we make a lot of money doing this. That makes sense. And it's a preseason game, so who cares?
But no, but still, you still play home games.
Yeah.
So when you have home games.
But they always blame the computer, though, don't they? Isn't that always the complaint, or isn't that always the explanation? Well, we have a computer that just knocks out the schedule. What do you want us to do? Actually apply some human element to what we're doing here in our business plan?
Steve Hatzapetros does the schedule, and I recognize it's a thankless job.
Does he do it individually, though, or does he pump it into a computer?
Well, it's a computer, but then they go through it.
Sure.
Because teams will say, no, we're not going from Minnesota to Philadelphia to St. Louis.
Right.
We're not doing that.
Like, there has to be someone that eventually looks at it and say, this just isn't making sense.
Right.
Like pockets of it.
Yeah.
But not the whole thing.
Yeah. Like the Leafs go to Philadelphia, I think, this year twice in 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
That's
well, how about what the NBA is doing now, where the NBA is flying teams into cities to play them multiple times over the course of 3 nights.
So the NHL did that. I remember one time Edmonton played back-to-back games in Minnesota, and I don't think they scored in either of them when they were really struggling to score.
Mm-hmm.
But they did that, and of course that happened during the COVID season.
Right, COVID was doing that all the time.
Yeah.
But it's about load management. It's about trying to help the players from feeling like they're being run down.
Yeah,
I don't love it.
Charter planes.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know that it's certainly not the grind.
I think it's difficult to sell to your fans if you have a bad team in town.
Well,
like if you get the Warriors in town,
but
that'd be great. But if you have the worst team in the NBA, why? How are you going to sell tickets for a game on a Tuesday and a Thursday against the worst team in the league?
The other issue is now it's different in Toronto, where not many people own the tickets. Not many people own season tickets.
Corporations.
And when they do, they parcel them out. But in places like Buffalo, in Edmonton, in Calgary, where a lot of people buy the tickets, they hate 3 games in 4 days at home. Fans hate that because it's just it's too much.
But you're never going to get the perfect schedule. It's not possible to do that.
So Steve Hatzapetros has a thankless job. But I think, first of all, they need to rejig the matrix so you play more divisional games. There's a way to do it, to play more divisional games.
They used to do that.
They did.
And then they adjusted again on the fly once they get to 32 teams.
Right. But there's still a way to expand to 84 games in the season.
You're going to add games?
Add 2. Take out.
How about subtract games?
That'll never happen.
No, I know it will never happen.
But hang on. You're taking out 2 preseason games. Set a max. The players are all in shape. You can only play 4 preseason games. So do that. 4 preseason games, add 2 regular season games, and you get more. Take out some of those conference games. So Toronto plays Philadelphia less, Carolina less.
Yeah, I agree with that. Listen.
Now the problem is that in some markets, they want those, especially Atlantic Division teams. They want Toronto. They want Montreal. They want Boston. Right? They want those teams. But you know what? I got to tell you, in a lot of Eastern markets in the NHL, they could care less. They don't care how good Colorado is. They could care less if Edmonton and Colorado ever came to their building. They'll sell more tickets in Boston for a game against the Islanders than they will for Edmonton or Colorado. I mean, McDavid and Edmonton went through, didn't sell it in Pittsburgh, didn't sell it in Edmonton.
Really?
They don't. Now, it's different for Western.
It's more about the regional.
It's different for Western teams. For teams in the Western Conference, they want.
Well, because there's so many transplant Eastern.
They want the Rangers. They want Toronto.
Yeah,
they want Boston. They want Philadelphia.
Well, I've said before, and I still stand by this. I don't need competitive balance at all in terms of the way the scheduling lays out. I think they've always, like, the leagues have always been a prisoner to that, and I understand why probably a lot of owners complain about it or want it that way. And you want to put forth this front that everyone's playing on an equal playing ground. But I don't need that at all. It's a business in the end, and it's the entertainment business.
Well, look at baseball. I mean, look at the wild card races in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
They don't play a balanced schedule.
Well, exactly. I mean, in terms of a pursuit of the playoffs, you're right. And in the NFL, it's different. Every year you're playing different divisions. Like, yes, you play your own division twice, and you'll play some conference games, but you might play the NFC North and you'll play the AFC South one year. They could be great. They could be awful. You never know. It's just the luck of the draw when you come up.
And it's weighted.
And it's weighted based on how you were the previous year. And they flex schedules. Like, the NFL gets it from that standpoint. But, and again, I understand the complexity of trying to put together a schedule, 6 months before the season even begins, and you're sharing buildings, and there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of different complications. But for me, I'm choosing whichever games are going to create the most buzz, sell the most tickets, and get the highest TV ratings.
So here's the thing. The funny thing is, if the NHL shortened to a 60-game season, when would it start?
Beginning of November?
And American NHL owners would want to start at American Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want it. So part of the other problem with the schedule is American teams, for the most part, don't want to play in October.
Right, because the NHL, or because the NFL and college football, and there's a lot of competition there.
So they don't want to play home games in October. So now they submit fewer dates. So teams like Ottawa, Montreal wind up playing a ton of home games in October.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and so you get into that.
Yeah, it's never going to be perfect,
but I do think there are ways you could address it, and one of the ways is schedule divisional games in March and April.
Yeah, I think that would go a long way to creating a lot more buzz down the stretch.
Have more divisional games, play more divisional games, and play them especially late in the year.
Yeah. Now, if there's teams that are out, those games don't mean as much. Like, Leafs-Habs is always big, but last year when the Habs were awful, it wasn't. By the end of the year, you're like, this is a formality. The Leafs are in, the Habs are awful. Montreal wants to lose, the Leafs want to win. So, you could counter that by saying earlier in the year it might actually mean more in terms of the disparity between the best teams and the worst teams.
I was in Montreal late in the year for a Leaf game, and there was still the buzz. There was still
of course, because that's who they are.
That's just, but
it wasn't about 2 points necessarily. It was about history.
Right.
But you're going to get that whenever they play.
Right. But that's the point with divisional games is that history does build up.
Yeah. Right. But as I was saying, in terms of competitive balance, I would find a way to get McDavid to Eastern Canada more than once.
Well, you can't do that.
Why not?
Because you can't, if you start playing more than 2 games against your conference.
Why?
Well, because now you're going to be taking away divisional games.
So?
No one wants that.
What do you mean no one wants that?
No one wants that.
Why does no one want that?
NHL owners want more divisional games. They don't want more games.
You don't think the Leafs, Senators, and Montreal Canadiens
those three would
not want Connor McDavid in town more than Florida?
Those three would.
Exactly.
But Boston, Philadelphia, Detroit, Buffalo do not.
They would.
I just told you, McDavid went to Pittsburgh and the game didn't sell out.
I understand
didn't sell out in Detroit.
Yeah. Well, that says something about those markets. But I find it hard to believe Florida is selling out there. Well, are they? Probably not.
If you play in a playoff, I guarantee you Florida-Boston games will sell next year after their playoffs.
They might. I mean, Boston's a different beast because it's a big hockey market, big sports market. They sell out most games, is my understanding.
Most Eastern NHL teams
in the States
would rather only play once against the other conference. Mm-hmm. They'd be happy if McDavid came once every second year.
Yeah, but I'm sure there are teams within the East that they also. Do you think they care if Columbus rolls through Florida? Do you think Florida's sitting there saying, "Thank God Columbus is here because they're in the East"?
No,
I don't think so.
But for every Columbus, you do get Pittsburgh, Washington, Philadelphia. I mean, Philadelphia's not a very good team, but they're still a draw.
Mm-hmm.
There's still lots of.
That's a big market, right? Big history.
So for every Columbus you get 3 good teams in your division.
Yeah. Well, again, I think there's a balance there. This is pie in the sky stuff. It's never going to happen, but it's living in the moment and effectively changing your schedule year in, year out based on what is happening in your league that year.
Right.
Like, perfect world scenario, and I'm using McDavid as the example. The Edmonton Oilers rolling through Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa once. is not good for business. If they rolled through twice, three times, 4 times, it would be remarkable for business.
Okay, so McDavid comes through. That's great.
Yeah.
So who else is coming to
Well, Vancouver, the same thing applies.
Right, okay.
I think Vancouver.
And San Jose and L.A.
No, because you don't have to do that. Again,
I see.
They can roll through another part of the country.
Oh, I see.
San Jose can go through Florida 2 times.
You ever think that sometimes you're a bit regionally centric?
Of course I am. Of course I am. But there's obviously other examples, I'm sure, that would probably land down in the States. Like you tell me Chicago going through New York wouldn't sell more than once a year? I think it probably would. I think L.A. going through the Garden more than once a year would probably sell.
They would tell you that then if you're doing it divisionally, St. Louis, Minnesota, Dallas.
Those sting. Yeah, I get it. But who wants those teams ever outside of regional games?
But the Rangers want more Islanders.
Yes,
I understand
that.
They want more Devils. They want more Philadelphia.
Give them that.
More Washington.
Sure, give them that.
You can't have both.
Yes, you can.
No, you can't.
Yes, you can, because you're basing it on individual teams.
You want a 96-game schedule.
Yeah. No, I want 80. Actually, I want less than 82. But I know that's never going to happen. Let's be honest. The league is, according to Gary Bettman, everything's perfect.
Nothing's wrong.
But nothing's ever going to change. You don't have to add a wild card. You don't have to add games or subtract games. You don't have to do anything. Everything's all good. All right, Milos Raonic, the dream has come to an end here.
Good run, though.
Great run here in Toronto. Yeah. Great run in Toronto. Carlos Alcaraz won last night. He's through to the round of 16. Patrick McEnroe will join us of ESPN. Thanks. This is big for you. You're a big tennis guy.
I'm a big
McEnroe guy. He is phenomenal.
He's phenomenal.
Yes, he's awesome to have on.
And I'm a big fan. So,
yes. Okay, little tennis talk just for you, Gord. I know. I expect you to really pepper away at McEnroe here. Go Larry King on this guy. But, no, he's great. He's been on the show a lot, and we're glad to have him back. So Patrick McEnroe coming up. We'll get his take on what's going on in Toronto and Montreal, looking ahead to the U.S. Open as well. Gord Miller's in here. I'm Bryan Hayes. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on TSN 4. OverDrive continues, brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Patrick McEnroe will join us here in a moment.
Yeah.
And we got Alex Anthopoulos coming up in about a half an hour. The Braves losing today to Pittsburgh. I heard that Bryan Hayes was putting on a clinic today for the Pirates. One of my favorite players.
Well, why wouldn't he be?
Yeah, great handle. Great handle, third base, hits for power. Pirates, I mean, not necessarily a team that we discuss a lot on this show, but we do talk about Atlanta a lot, and Anthopoulos done himself a pretty good job.
Best record in baseball, right?
Yeah.
Most wins in baseball.
They are the kings of the county, man. The expectations are the Braves they're chasing another World Series. I wouldn't bet against them. And Anthopoulos coming up in about a half an hour. I don't think he's planning on being up here this weekend when Bautista goes into the level of excellence, but yeah, we'll ask him.
We probably shouldn't ask Patrick McEnroe. I think he's a Mets fan.
Is he a Mets fan? Yeah.
I think.
I don't think anyone admits to that publicly anymore. Wow. I think publicly you can't admit that you're a Met fan, right? This is one of the most disappointing seasons in recent history. It's awful. They're selling pieces. Steve Cohen, he doesn't know what he's doing now. All right, here he is from ESPN, president of the International Tennis Hall of Fame, Holding Court podcast host, and Met fan, Patrick McEnroe. Are you admitting to that, Patrick?
Well, listen, guys, you got the first few right, but despite the fact that I grew up in Queens, about 15 minutes away from what was then called Shea Stadium, which, by the way, I refer to more as the home of the U.S. Open, Flushing Meadows, which is right next to there. Believe it or not, since the age of 11, which was 1977 for me. And do you remember what happened in 1977
Reggie,
in
baby.
the baseball world?
Reggie, baby.
Bingo. And guess who was sitting in the upper deck with his dad?
Wow.
No. Did he hit one near you? So one of those, one of those 3 home runs went in the upper deck.
All I remember was I was in the right field upper deck, and when Reggie hit the third homer, my dad looked at me, grabbed me by the arm, and said, "Son, we're out of here." This is pandemonium. Yeah, we had to get to the car early and beat the traffic and get back to Queens from the Bronx. So from that point on, I've been a longtime Yankee fan.
Okay.
That being said, I have a soft spot for the Mets because I grew up, as I said, close to there. But this year, disaster with a capital D.
I remember hearing a story. I can't remember who was telling it publicly. There was a celebrity from New York, big Yankee fan, who I think was at that game. And his dad had the opposite reaction. His dad threw him on the field after the game and said, "I'll meet you at second base." And his kid, and he just ran on because I guess people were storming the field, right? Like that happened all the time at Yankee Stadium.
Yeah, that was a regular occurrence, and that definitely happened at the end of that game. We left, I think it was the 8th inning when Reggie hit the 3rd homer, if I'm not mistaken. It was the 7th or the 8th, and so we left right after that to get out of there. My dad was a good man. He wanted to protect his youngest son. I have my older brother, John, and I have another brother, Mark. I'll tell you one little last quick story. John had always been a Yankee fan, too. The 3 of us grew up, and we all became Yankee fans. And when he lost in the Wimbledon final, the famous Wimbledon final to Borg, and later that year, the Yankees lost to the Dodgers. If you remember, they got swept in the series, in the World Series. And George Steinbrenner apologized to the New York fan base and the public. John got so pissed off because he had just come in second, losing to Borg, which for him was, this monumental match. And, the fans all got behind him when he lost that epic 5-setter. So from that point on, my brother John has been a Mets fan.
You're kidding.
He switched.
He switched, which is very unusual, as for New Yorkers to switch from the Mets to the Yankees or the Jets to the Giants or, whatever it may be. So there you go. That's a last little tidbit for you.
I like it.
Someone in that McEnroe family's got to appreciate the Mets, right? Somebody does. Well, listen,
exactly.
We appreciate you joining us here, and obviously, we're right in the center of the storm here with tennis going on here in Toronto, and the women are in Montreal, and we just saw Milos Raonic. He ended up losing, but he was on, a pretty cool run here in his hometown, and he played at Wimbledon. He won himself a match there, but it's basically the going away tour here for Milos. Like he hasn't been playing in years. He's had so many injuries. But there was a time in his career where it felt like this guy was going to compete for slams. He made it to a final. But how would you look back on his career? If this is the end of the road for Raonic, how would you define it?
Well, first of all, I hope it's not the end of the road, because I think, the fact he hadn't played for a couple of years and then has come back and, as you said, played pretty well in the last month, including a real nice run up there this week before losing to Mackie McDonald, who's a solid player today. I hope he can play a couple more years. I mean, he's still relatively young. I mean, he's in his early 30s. You're seeing guys now play until their mid to late 30s. Obviously, with the injuries he's had, that's always a huge question mark. But, I love Milos. Obviously, as you guys may remember, my brother helped him that year. He did make the Wimbledon final, was working with him. So, he's very close with him. I got to know him a little bit through the Labor Cup when he played on the team for Team World a couple of years ago. So great guy, very thoughtful, intelligent guy. And obviously you've had some great success with Felix and with Dennis and Bianca, coming after him. But he really set the stage for taking Canadian tennis to the top of the game, to the top of the men's game. And now you've got a couple of great talents, both of whom are struggling, as we know, at the moment. So I hope that Milos can play a little bit longer. I mean, with his serve, and if he can, as we said, stay healthy, can he get back to a major final? I doubt it, but I think he could certainly get back to being, a top 20 type player.
I think, one of the things, Patrick, when you look at the career of Milos Raonic is that everyone talked about the serve. Do we appreciate his game enough?
No, he was. He has an excellent forehand. He's a guy that worked extremely hard on his baseline game. I believe it or not, I actually think he worked too hard on it. I think he should have, just been more of like a John Isner type player. Go big on the serve. Go big on the forehand. Take more chances. Obviously, he moves a lot better than someone like Isner, and I think in some ways that maybe hurt him, because it's almost like he tried to become too well-rounded of a player. And a little bit, I think, went away from his strengths, which is just crash and bash. And, a similar thing happened to a great American, Andy Roddick, as well, who I spent a lot of time with in my years as the Davis Cup captain. It's almost like as he became a more well-rounded player, he became less dangerous. because he's never going to move as well as, Djokovic and Federer and Nadal and these guys. And I think Raonic fell into that trap a little bit, whereas, of course, you got to improve, different parts of your game. But I would have liked him, have seen him just become, an all-out aggressive player and just take his chances doing that. So we'll see if, he tries to do a little bit more of that. But, he's a guy that worked extremely hard on his fitness, on his body, and on being able to move around the court a little bit better. And I'm not sure in the long run if that was the best strategic move for him.
With Patrick McEnroe, Carlos Alcaraz won his match last night. He's on center court tonight. And obviously he's the number one seed. We saw what he just did at Wimbledon, getting past Djokovic. And everyone's familiar with what he's done already in his career. And the projections are getting wild in terms of what he could do the rest of the way. On the men's side, it's been dominated by Federer, Nadal, Djokovic for over 15 years now. How would you handicap the chances of Alcaraz getting anywhere close to the stratosphere of any of these three giants that have been dominating for 15 years?
Well, I think from just strictly a tennis standpoint, from what he can do on the court, I think it's very possible that he could get to those sort of stratospheric levels as a champion. Now, obviously, he's young. And his health will be a major factor in how, when you looked at Nadal when he was, at this age, 19, 20, 21, you're thinking, oh, this guy plays with such ferocity. How's he going to last past 28, 29? Of course, he's played until his mid-30s. With Federer, I don't think we were as surprised because he played with such an elegance. I certainly wouldn't have predicted that Djokovic, even now at 35, 36, is playing arguably the best he's ever played, right, in the last couple of years. So there's no doubt from a strictly tennis standpoint, the firepower that Alcaraz has, the ability to play every shot, which we sort of saw him do through the course of that run to the Wimbledon title, where he's playing the slice a lot more, being able to come to net, defending, playing balls off the bounce, playing defense, lightning fast speed. The only thing I worry about really with him, guys, is it's almost like an incredibly successful young, whether it's your favorite sport up there, hockey or football in the U.S., these phenomenal athletes that are so fast, so explosive that you worry they're just going to, get hurt basically. After a few years, they're just going to keep running into walls. So I think if Alcaraz can learn how to pace himself and obviously take care of that physique, when you look at his game, he can win on any surface. He's already won on every surface. He's won the U.S. Open on hard. He's won major tournaments already on clay. And, of course, now he's got a Wimbledon title. So when you look at what he can do, and you look at the fact that, Yannick Sinner, the Italian, Holger Rune, who I saw got upset up there already, the other young guys, he seems to me to be pretty far ahead of them at the moment, not to mention he's sprinting past the guys like Tsitsipas and Medvedev and, the guys that have been there for a number of years already. He just seems like he's that much better. So at the moment, it looks like he's going to be able to win pretty much any big tournament he plays over the course of the next, minimum 5. And if he stays healthy, likely more than a decade.
And the thing about him, Patrick, that's interesting is the first serve isn't overpowering, but, Djokovic is probably, would you agree, the greatest returner of serve ever, and Alcaraz might be better than Djokovic.
Well, that's a great point. I'm going to say Djokovic at the moment is better because he's rangier and he's got more flexibility and he's not, he doesn't miss as much. Alcaraz still, if there's anything about his game that it's almost he's too explosive at times. But I think as he learns to manage himself and realize, I can play it 50 to 75% and win a lot of points and therefore win a lot of matches, he may end up being downright unbeatable. Right now, he can sort of hit himself out of some games and maybe not matches as much. But he's much more explosive on the return than Djokovic, but he's not as consistent and not as nimble as Djokovic, who to me has had the perfect combination of being a great defensive returner while also being a great offensive returner when he had to be. Agassi, in my year and back in the day, was the greatest offensive returner, and I would put Alcaraz at the top of that list now. Can he become the greatest all-time returner? That's still left to be answered.
So before we go, Patrick, I have to tell you, I'm a hockey announcer who's also a tennis junkie, but years ago, I did an exhibition match on TV in Toronto. Andy Roddick played Pete Sampras in an exhibition match up here.
Right.
I was broadcasting with Daniel Nestor, and you were watching it on the Tennis Channel for some reason on like a Monday night, and you tweeted at me that I was doing a good job on the tennis, but get Daniel to speak up more. I got to say, that compliment from you is one of the greatest compliments I've ever received in my life, because I'm not a tennis announcer, but I appreciated that very much. It gave me a huge boost to get through that day.
There you go.
So thank you.
Well, more importantly than that, did you get Daniel Nestor to speak up?
Yeah, exactly. Did you listen, Gord, or what? You retweeted and
Patrick,
you went on with your life.
Patrick, I'm only one man.
Yeah.
I'm only one.
There's
I
so much you
understand.
can expect.
I understand.
Come on. There's only so much you can expect.
You did great back in that day, and it's nice of you guys to have on a tennis guy like me on your show, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're happy to. Enjoy the rest of the tournament up here in Toronto. U.S. Open right around the corner. It's going to be a blast. Thank you, Patrick.
You guys enjoy. Take care.
There's
Thanks.
Patrick McEnroe of ESPN, the Holding Court podcast. Did you retweet and like, or did you quote tweet with a thumbs up emoji?
I don't remember.
It must have been a quote tweet. That's got to be a quote tweet.
I remember just being like, whoa.
Yeah, listen, Patrick McEnroe, he's one of my favorites, man. He's great to have on. Like, he can go anywhere. Like, I wasn't planning on getting into the Mets, Yankee thing. I wanted to ask him about Aaron Rodgers and the Jets and him being, like, in New York. Because you see, someone sent me a DM on Instagram about a story of how Rodgers is spending every meal with a different teammate because he's Mr. Leadership now, right? So
What do you mean now?
I'm telling you, Gord, there was a time he would have been that probably early in his run when he took over for Favre. By the end of it, you couldn't find this guy. You couldn't find this guy anywhere. He was so selfish in Green Bay at the end. He never showed up for camps. He wouldn't help young players. Now he's having breakfast with rookies, lunch with the O-line. He's Mr. Leadership now.
The entire 23 NFL season is going to be passive-aggressive shots by Brian Hayes at Aaron Rodgers.
Possibly.
It's going to be a torrent of passive aggression.
Although I need him to start. I need him to take snaps. If he is taking, I believe, 65% of the snaps for the Jets this year, the conditional second-round pick becomes a first-round pick.
For the Packers.
So there is a perfect world scenario where he takes 70% of the snaps, they lose a bunch of ball games, and the Packers get a great pick in response. I'm not anticipating that. And you know what could really soften the blow is Jordan Love playing well and the Packers playing well. Packers defense, I think, will be elite. If they stay healthy, I think they're going to be elite. I think they'll have a run game. I think their line's going to be okay. You may only need 9-10 wins to win the division this year. I'm starting to come around. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but I'm starting to come around.
You just talked yourself into that.
Yeah, I'm starting to get there.
You just convinced you.
I can envision that.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I think it's more likely they have a tough season, like a really tough season than actually a positive one. But it's not out of the realm of possibility. All right, Alex Anthopoulos in about 15 minutes.
Can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be great. We'll catch up with AA in about 15 minutes. Overdrive continues, TSN 1050N on TSN 4. All right, Alex Anthopoulos in about 15 minutes. You see these Phil Mickelson reports, allegations. $1 billion, according to someone who is very connected in Vegas.
And a friend of his.
And a longtime friend of his who eventually they had a falling out. He's written a book. So these are simply allegations, but they're pretty well sourced. And the allegations are suggesting that Phil Mickelson has made upwards of $1 billion worth of bets and has lost upwards of $100 million. And there were times, specifically between 2010 and 2014, when Phil has been on record saying there was a time where it got really out of hand. This guy was making bets that were crazy. Like crazy. We're talking putting $200,000 down on anything and not thinking twice about it. There was one report within the book, or I guess, an excerpt of the book that suggested there was one day, and I believe in 2013, he made 43 baseball bets, which I don't even know how that's possible when at most there's 15 games. So you're betting money line, you're betting the totals. That might give you 30 bets.
Parlays?
I guess you could do parlays that could get you to 43. Maybe back. I mean, there's props, and if you're betting with bookies or whatever, back then they'll take basically anything. But it's wild what Phil was up to, and there have been stories that have come out that have been written about him about his on the course activities.
Yeah.
Like betting with Gary McCord on whether or not he'd hit a 15-footer during a tournament.
Well, there's legendary stories. I mean, golfers are gamblers. I mean,
yes, it is somewhat synonymous with the sport.
There are legendary stories about skins games in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Greg Norman, Raymond Floyd was a pair. They always said that if PGA pros played for their own money, that Raymond Floyd would win every week.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is a totally different beast when you're putting money on the line. When you're playing a match one-on-one for big money.
Playing for a purse is different than playing for your own.
Totally. You're just trying to make the cut, then you know you're getting paid, and then it's how much can I get? When it's like I'm putting my own cash down and you're playing like a big Nassau, like, you know, 50 grand, a 9 or something like that. You're putting big money. It's the famous Michael Jordan saying, right? What is the price going to be that will make you uncomfortable? Because then I'm going to beat you.
And former Leaf Clark MacArthur plays golf with Jordan 4 times a week now in Florida.
Does he make it uncomfortable? I'm guessing Clark must put. You can't play with Jordan unless you're betting.
And MacArthur beats him pretty consistently.
For money?
Mm-hmm.
You have to. Like MJ's not playing unless there's cash on the line. That's I need to know more about that. All right, Alex Anthopoulos coming up in the next hour. OverDrive continues. TSN 1050 and on the TSN app.